convert. So we got the beginning, then we'll have this one. Okay. So, so Charles's question, the ministry insight on this area is going to give more life concerns, the reasons for why people do or do not participate in religious programs, preferred ministry programs, all of which are based on that specific area. The religious one is more community beliefs and religious preferences. So why don't we just go to that one first? So on the religious part, you're going to see, for example, some standard questions they ask, and where people strongly agree to strongly disagree, they'll chart it out for you. So you have some sense. Now, again, this is pretty broad in the questions, but you will see, for example, where they are above or below the kind of the standard deviation that's there. So for this area, I believe in nature and or spirits in nature, they more strongly disagree with that than you would expect in any given area. And again, everything can be in numbers or a chart, so that you can look at it in a variety of ways. So this gives you, again, there's 30 pages of information here. You can really zero in on, examine. America has a more responsibility to have a force for good in the world. So you see between strongly agree and somewhat agree, so 60, almost 70% there, whereas that's not here. I'll refrain from making any observations based off that. And again, how they are in comparison with the rest. Again, in this area, stronger disagreement that asking the rich to pay a higher tax rate is a way to establish economic justice. So if you look at this community, that's not going to be a huge surprise. Or we should give more attention to economic justice. They are going to more likely disagree with that. But they're pretty strong, and they have hope for their own future, especially in their own community. Then that's the religious. Now you'll get more to the bottom here. You'll see where they have the breakdown. I always question this one before that even it seems be a bit more. They show the PCA. There is a presence of someone here. So yeah, they register that. There are a number of families in that community. As well as degrees of involvement, growth, development. Are they more or less involved over time? What's the role of religious faith? So a little bit higher, that there is some significance in that community. So there is some openness to religious faith, changing in views, what have you. When you come to the ministry one, here you're going to see more of more broader areas of outreach, whereas the religious insight is more going to be specific religious theological views. This is going to be more lifestyle, hopes and dreams, if you will. So if you're really wondering what are the big issues, you're still there, good. The big issues here, to be able to see what are their areas of significant concern. Most of these are below the national average, other than losing weight and diet issues. So unemployment, issues of addictions and health are not tremendous in this community. And again, you can find some of those factors here. There's more modest concerns. You're not seeing quite the heavy concerns in any really given area. There's a modest concern for marriage and romance that's involved. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of all that's involved on those levels. Any questions so far? It's like I'm not.
So it sounds like you can basically define your area and then pretty much just sort of click between all these reports and all these demographic views of it and sort of see basically whatever whatever category you're interested in looking at.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it in that sense, and I'll show you the next one. It's the Experian report, which even goes much deeper. So that's why I'm saying you can generate far more info than you're really going to probably want to digest. So your first key is learning how to know what you're really looking for. And that's where going from quick to executive to full can be a good progression, and even working with some of those sheets. If you are looking at planting, that's where you're going to want to compare some different segments, different areas. So, for this area in Economolk, you could break it down more specifically to south of that lake, to north of that lake, and see the difference there as well. So yeah, that helps.
Can I ask one other question? So I had asked about where this data is coming from. So it sounds like it's coming from census data and from other sources. So, but will something like in Kirksville over the last 3 to 5 years, probably 5 years, there's a significant influx of Congolese community.
Mm-hmm.
So that was where there was no Congolese community 5 years ago, and now there is 2,000 probably in Kirksville and its immediate surrounding area. Will that kind of recent data be available?
As they're updating the census, now we're right at a census year.
Right.
So that's you're going to see an influx there. There is some information I'm seeing from 2017 in here. So they're not going to show what happened in the last 2 years, but over the last 5, you'll see some of that movement. If they have any sense of possible movement, they do the trend analysis. So that will be a part of it. Yeah, where the data comes from, it really is diverse. There is a lot of it comes from Experian, which, credit card usage. So every time you swipe your credit card, they're figuring an awful lot about you and your community. And they've changed, MissionInsite have changed some of the output that I'm seeing. So some of the stuff I used to see, I don't see now. But I remember zeroing in on my neighborhood, doing just a zip 4, just 4 houses, my house and 3 others. And it was kind of freaky how much they were telling about us. Again, not just on the census data, that was all correct. And if I just took the average of those 4 houses, it was there. But also some of the hopes and dreams, even projecting where you'd want to go on vacation, what TV shows you're watching. Just knowing my home and my neighbors, it was spot on. So it's when Chuck did a presentation before, he mentioned they don't even know where some of this data is coming from, where it's being filtered in. It gets really detailed. The one caution here when I talk about it is some of our people, and this may be true for some of you, get a little freaked out about this kind of information. It's there and it's being used. You don't have to worry about black helicopters and putting tinfoil on your head, but the reality is it's out there, and I think it's only prudent for us to make use. It's legal, and so it's being used every time you go on Facebook. If Zuckerberg's using something, we can too, I guess. Any other questions? Okay, I want to talk a little bit then about the Experian part, the Mosaic, which is another component that is extremely helpful. I had mentioned, let me go back to these categories. The Mosaic segments are based off of consumer lifestyle classifications that are used across the board. This is not just MissionInsite. This is what every marketing consumer product analysis is using, in which they have 19 overarching categories and then 71 unique types that fit in each, that really paint our preferences, our choices, our habits, and a much more of a socio-economic kind of structure. And so you can download this that breaks down the different aspects of property, demographics, socioeconomics, location, financial measures that they're taking a look at. And so here are the main categories, and then you'll see how they're broken down into subcategories. Now, this one was published in 2016. This is what MissionInsite provides. I went online and I was able to get the 2019. One of those is like 300 some pages of information. Again, more information that you're really going to really need or want to spend time on. But they do update it. When I did some comparison analysis of 16, well, I was looking at 14, 16, and 19. They're pretty much the same across the board. So that when you look at these different groups, they will bring them out. So this is the overarching ones that, yeah, you have this power elite, but then they break the power elite down into what they call royalty, platinum prosperity, kids and Cabernet, and picture perfect families, couples with clout. These are going to be the wealthier end, but they break it all the way down into all of these. So what you would do is you go in here, and if you notice, the largest percentage segments based in 2019 are, again, booming with confidence. These are younger boomers, autumn years, a little bit older boomers, golden year speaks for itself, thriving boomers. So there's an awful lot here in that category. But if you're really looking more at families, looking here at the picture perfect ones, which is 04, this will give you a graphic, kind of infographic way. They don't as much anymore, but they would take the two names that are most common to this segment. We're only looking at less than 1% of the households or 1.5% of the people in the country that fit this category. These are wealthy, educated. They read, they're engaged. Kind of gives you their basic age breakdown, the majority there, and how many people are home. Over here, you'll see the communication methods. According to their studies, they're saying that texting and email are less likely to be used by them. Still using mail, television, and podcast or radio. It fits in both of those. You can break this down a little bit more into kind of see where they are the most strongest at. So again, well educated. There's a lot of money going there. The current value of their home, the ages of their children, they are above the national average. But again, as you go here, you could say, okay, that's one segment where we're looking at. The other one is, the next one coming up here is the singles and starters, which is the 051. You go there and you'll see a whole different segment. And all these are going to be in that same area. So again, you're going to see, given the age that's here, Generation Y, X, more millennial age group, and see the same things. And they always include some kind of goofy pictures that they think communicate who these people are. Now, with that, in an older analysis, you can download this. Again, this is from 2014. It's not too bad, but if I was to take you to that picture perfect family, they give you an explanation in a narrative form. Now, we're talking 7 years old, so they'll use words like iPods and some other things. But still, there's some helpful aspects here that can benefit. There is, again, all of this is found on the helps page. You can download all these things. There is a new one that they have developed that is their newest version. I think this is 2000. This might be 2019. There's a date on here somewhere. It's the same description, but a little bit different. Here they will tell you, based this group that is 6% of your community. Who are they associating with? Who are their neighbors? And you can get a sense of who they are. But there's also some ways of talking through it and thinking of, for you to think about it, to, how would you pastor these people? So they have leadership preferences. So who are they looking for? They are used to a CEO. When it comes to organic leaders, discipler, guru, and these terms are defined at the very, very bottom. So what do they want for hospitality? What are they looking for in worship practices? And so this helps you think through a lot of that in different ways. So again, an awful lot there. We just stop. Any questions?
So Chris, when you think through how this is all going to be relevant for your church, your presbytery, how do you personally then implement it? You said for preaching, for example, it's been helpful to you, or maybe doing some presbytery church planting planning. What are some of the ways that you're finding that you're utilizing MissionInsite then in these practical ways?
And that the Experian part, when it comes to just ongoing ministry, I found very helpful. So, and especially the way they have it now with that last thing I was showing you, that again, you can download from the site. And there's hundreds of pages. So if you identify who are those key segments in my community, so the largest one there in Oconomowoc was the Age of Aquarius. I love the names, booming with confidence. But you could go through and say, okay, what are they looking for? And again, this is where we have to know our own hearts and how the gospel's speaking to us, not to shift and morph everything to meet, because we're going to do it just for this area. But still, at the same time, to know if I want to reach this area, this is what they're looking for. And it is interesting, as they're with those worksheets, it kind of forces you to ask questions about leadership, hospitality, worship, and to be thinking, okay, is there something about what we are doing now or I am communicating now that I should be thinking otherwise? So if I'm looking and seeing the different communication preferences, mostly I look through there and go, I can't have a communication preference. I need multiple methods of connecting with my community. The last couple of weeks, I think, illustrated that well. It's amazing how many of us haven't used Zoom prior to March of 2020. So you can see a huge shift in some of these aspects. As far as for planting, again, I think on the early end, again, it's doing that analysis. Some of that deeper stuff really is saved to the end. But I think those initial aspects to really know where's their growth? Is there an upward trend? Is there a downward trend that needs to still have a place where we can effectively reach, and who should we be thinking about reaching in this area?
Okay. One of my favorite illustrations along these lines was the church that did a 1 mile parameter. They just wanted to know who was in their immediate vicinity. And they found that there were, in this particular case, 31 single-parent families within walking distance of their church. And they thought they knew their community, but realized they did not know this reality. Mm-hmm. So they actually began to reach out to those 31 single-parent families to develop ministries that served and supported them in various ways, and developed an incredible ministry to single-parent families that not only extended within that 1 mile radius, but those people knew people. They could start to connect. They started to invite, and it just opened up a whole new world of ministry for them, just simply because it exposed a demographic reality that they just did. It was just invisible to them for whatever reason, because they had developed certain patterns for doing ministry that just did not intersect with other segments of their community.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched that with a fellow who's from Mexico, Hispanic, and he said the town I'm in, really aren't many Hispanics. I know all the Mexicans in this city, and so I did the same thing. I drew a small several block radius around his house and said there are 71 households that are more Mexican than you, because those 71 households speak Spanish at home, and he's married to an Anglo. They don't speak Spanish at home. And he said, I haven't seen them. And I said, don't make me have to racially profile, but walk up and down your street, they're there. Yeah, it's an amazing thing. It really encouraged him to reach out to keep his eyes a lot more open just on his own 3-4 block area.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I really encourage you, once you kind of zero in on an area, start doing smaller segments. So you get a lot more specific data. I know with the church you're at, they plotted, Ted and Ann, they plotted all their members and did an overlay of members in community. And again, it's a great way of how are we really reaching? Are we reflecting the community that we're in? And if not, where can we do better? There's another function here I don't think we have access to, but it's called the neighborhood. I forget what it is, but you can also zero in and ask questions. Where are such and such, and ask some more specific questions, and even get more, I think perhaps names and addresses. You can also do for mailings, you can get that information if you want to pay for it. I don't know how effective that is right now, but that's there too.
So other questions that anybody might have for Chris, just practical uses or something like that, or maybe ways in which you have been have expressed interest in this, that you're hoping to use it.
Well, my main question was just, how do we get access to it?
I can help you with that. Everyone has to have their own username, which is fairly simple to set up. I can send you those instructions via email. It's just going to the MissionInsite website and putting in our group number for the Midwest. There is one group number, and then it will walk you through the steps to set up a username. Once you've done that, I have to approve that you are in fact one of us to give you access, which is again a very quick function once you set up the username. And then you're ready to go. You can use these tools that Chris has just outlined so well. And yeah, the sky's the limit after that. As far as plotting your congregations, if you have a congregation at this point and you're interested in doing that, once you have a username and you've gotten more comfortable with, the menus and all that kind of stuff, you will find a place where it says upload names, addresses. They need it in a spreadsheet form. I don't know, Chris, if you're still on the site and if you can find that quickly.
Yep.
As far as updating that information, if you did that a while ago, they don't have access to that information without us. So if you feel like your data is a little bit old or compromised, you'll need to redo that step to get a fresh view of where your people actually live. They depend on us to do that. So that's where that comes from. That is not a necessary thing to do to use the site, as Chris said. It's just helpful if you want to get a snapshot of where your people already live, where you're actually drawing people from, that kind of thing. They recommend it, but it's not required.
So it's here under plotting. So if you were to,
and
yep, sorry. So the download button is here, and on the main button, you would see it again as well when you log in. It's one of the first options.
Yeah. In the older iteration of this website, they provided you with a form to use. It was just a basic Excel sheet. And so, you can do it that way. If they have upgraded that, the instructions, I will say these people do a great job with instructions and helps and things like that. They do have staff who's basically on call. If you have a question you can't figure out from the website, they will help you with it. They've been good about that.
Yeah, thank you. To that end, here are videos. So again, a lot of this is on the people, how to people plot and such, but everything I said, you'll see here. You just don't have the pleasure of my beautiful voice and lovely face. And as well as you have all those reports and worksheets available. Just go to the help button.
Hey, this is Clint. What is the cost we're looking at, Ted and Ann? What's the typical cost for the Midwest?
Well, you'd think that would be a simple question to answer. It's really not. What they do for, if a region wants to band together as a kind of consortium, they look at the number of churches in that consortium area and figure it out based on that. For the Midwest region, as it is defined right now, the contract price that we are under is roughly $9,000. And so the way we have managed that is by going to individual presbyteries, networks, and churches to ask them to cover that cost. And if they do that on a yearly basis, we're able to offer it for free to every PCA church and mission in the Midwest region. For you, Clint, where you are, that's probably the kind of thumbnail sketch of how they would do it, but how the money would work out would be different.
Right. So what we did was we asked each different presbytery to kick in a certain amount based on how many churches they had within their own presbytery.
Okay.
Some presbyteries were asked to pay a little bit more, some were asked to pay a little bit less based on the number of churches that were in there. But because of that, nobody ended up having to pay a lot. Between our 15 presbyteries, we're able to spread that out quite a bit. And that means that every single church in the Midwest region, there's about 250 of us at this point, are now unlimited access to this resource without having to pay any additional fees, that kind of thing. And I think I can't remember what the number breaks down to, but it's something like $40 per church per year is what all that breaks down to now.
And that's $9,000 annually, and is it just an annual renewable contract, or is it a 3-year or 5-year deal, or how does that work?
At the initial point, they quoted us a contract price that would be in place for 3 years, paid yearly. They have not upped our price since then.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have been in this past October bought out by another ACS Technologies based out of South Carolina, which is a church software management, a CRM, and I think their approach is going to be, I think, kind of moving forward. They'd love to work with us as a denomination. Benji, you mentioned that Chris Bolton said they're still looking at a denominational deal.
Yeah, the last time I talked to him, he said that they were talking to MissionInsite. I think it was just a lower priority for the national office, but I don't know what all their considerations were. That was at one conversation.
Yeah. So I'd encourage you, if you're able to get in your area, your region, either that or Clint, or you just move up to the Midwest.
You're welcome.
Well, one of the ways I'm using this too is that with every presbytery, I'm helping them to identify their top 5, 10, 15 church planting target areas. Just beginning to lay out some plans, develop priorities, lay the groundwork for church planting. And then with each one of those locations for that presbytery, we can generate these reports. And our Dottie will do a profile for us of 2 or 3 pages that just gives that initial portrait of a target community that we can use for recruiting and vision casting and things of that nature. And so we've been able to generate a number of those that have been really helpful. And so, for example, even for North Dakota, where John St. Martin is planting in Fargo, we would like to plant some additional churches in Williston and Grand Forks and Bismarck and so forth and so on, and to be able to get a profile for each one of those. But we don't have to pay the $300 every single time we generate these reports. We can generate as many reports as we want for all the different regions, states, presbyteries of our region without any additional cost whatsoever. If we do that individually, like I said, it would cost $300 a report. If we do a couple hundred of these reports, it's just so cost efficient.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the attractive part, I think, talking to Chris earlier, and then one of the new chairman from the Mid-South, networks are trying to build value in partnerships. And I think this is an easy way for people to see value long-term. People who are doing renewal or outreach or any churches, I think there's a huge value to be able to collaborate. And especially since there's not as much, it's getting harder to just do an ask. I do think this is a good project, kind of ask for a 3-year commitment and get churches on board, because I do think there could be huge value in sharing this information and showing churches that have assumed a lot for long periods of time that things have actually changed around them. Their entire counties have changed. And you said you have Dottie is the one person that administrates and does the research. How do you, that would be a choke, kind of a choke point. That would be very important, I would think, to pay somebody to actually knows the software, could do the reporting.
People, they don't have the time to generate these reports.
Right.
Because they're so busy. That's where Dottie has been an absolute godsend. And so what Chris Vogel has done, or I have done, or Phil Douglas in St. Louis, whatever, we've just said, Dottie, could we have profiles for these communities? And then as she's able to, she generates the reports for us. So Dottie, I don't know if you want to speak more to that, or Ann, you want to speak more to that.
Yeah, it really only takes a few minutes for each location I'm given, as long as I'm given an address or a zip code or whatever your standard is, a 2.5 mile radius around this address, I might spend 15 minutes. So the learning curve's great. The amount of time you'll put into reading the reports is great, but on my end, it doesn't take very long, and I'd love to see people using it. The amount of information that you get, and for the planners that I'm helping in other parts of the country that don't have access to this, I feel so bad for them. I wish the whole PCA would adopt this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those reports I did on Economal Walk. So about 8 different reports. Yeah, it took about till I drew the polygon, hit the button a couple times, downloaded them. Yeah, 10, 15 minutes.
Waiting for them to download is the longest part, really.
Right.
Everything else, I mean, yeah. I probably can do it in 2 or 3 minutes, but then you have to wait for the download. Right. So
but that
gladly do it.
That speaks of putting in the effort on the front end, which Chris has just outlined. And Clint, as much as I appreciate Dottie and want Dottie, I wish I could clone her in so many different ways. I wish I could clone her. There need to be some local experts in every region who not only know how to do it, but who can do things like this that Chris has just done. If you don't want that to be you, that's fine. But it can't just be something you completely outsource. It has to be owned.
Mm-hmm.
But until you have that person, don't, if you have access to this and you want the reports for now while you're developing, there's other resources. I am more than happy to do these.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much. And that makes a lot of sense.
You have access to what? Just the Midwest or other regions?
Just the Midwest.
Okay. And do you know what other regions have this right now?
Unfortunately, I don't know whose contracts have lapsed in recent days. So,
yeah.
We were at a point where it was literally coast to coast.
But you could do like a string from west to east and get it all the way across. Not that the whole continental United States was covered,
right.
But you could draw a somewhat straight line to get place to place. But the access is only given regionally, unless you are, I guess they can give access to everyone, but there's no one right now currently who should have that as far as a structural basis. So,
just going back to sort of using it, you drew your polygon and stuff. I'm assuming you could just say, I want this zip code, mm-hmm. or I want, the Kirksville city limits, or I want Adair County, or, I'm assuming all of those sort of already geographical defined things you can already just use.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. On one of the early screens, if you jump in, it will give you the screen. We'll just right away say demographic study. We'll say custom predefined. If you say predefined, it would give you, all those options. So you could do census tracts, zip codes, municipalities, everything.
Okay.
Usually, and again, that's the way I normally think is, what are the more geographic boundaries? Highways, kind of railroad tracks, one side or the other. Zip codes can cross those at times, but
sure.
Yeah.
So I have a question. We have sort of an unusual situation in the sense that Kansas is a lot of small towns. And so where our church plant is, we actually have very few people in our church that live in our community. We actually represent about 10 to 12 different communities around our city. Has anybody ever used this, like for, maybe for their congregation, where not only do they strategize for their church using this, but maybe even doing reports for different communities that are represented, like these 10 communities I'm talking about, and then letting their congregation know what kind of people are around them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. What I would do with that, Rick, is go ahead and plot your congregation, do that upload, get their exact homes on the map, and then do a polygon around them. And then they'll know who in their neighborhood, I mean, if it's close enough for them to come to church, maybe they'll come to church.
Okay.
I think it would also be instructive to do like a 2-mile radius around where you meet and get the needs of the people there as well. Sometimes people are motivated to come for theological reasons for, a drive that other people won't. Yeah. So you kind of need to do a both and.
Okay, thank you.
Is that what you would have said, Chris?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can be real helpful.
We had a experience with using this. We were trying to reach. We have a mission partnership with a Presbyterian pastor and some churches in Colombia in South America, and the pastor was coming up here, and we used this to get mailing addresses for all the Spanish-speaking households within a radius of this. So we sent postcards to each household. No one showed up, but about send that to get mailing addresses. We did have to pay an extra fee for that. Just FYI, if you're thinking about how to use that in the future. One part of the strategy, I guess.
Right. Well, Chris, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if folks do come up with some additional questions, are you accessible for them? And of course, everybody's here can contact Ann or me as far as if you have questions. I'm having trouble getting on. How do I connect, or how do I use this, or whatever? But Chris, if you're available, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, I'm not traveling anywhere, and I'm an extrovert, and I'm really lonely sitting in my basement. So I'll talk to anybody, even church planters. Yeah, no, I'd be glad to help any way I can. Again, I don't know everything about it. I've found it helpful. I really like it. I'd like to see us use it up more and more, and let others jump in. So yeah, feel free to reach out. And I am going to try to advocate with some other areas to get it broadened out. I'll be talking to Chuck and his boss. We're trying to set up a meeting to help continue that conversation.
Yeah, and I will say every year when it comes up to the renewal for getting this resource available again for the Midwest region, we rely on people who caught this vision early on. But honestly, if you find this to be helpful, we need more partners to keep this as a resource in the region. And again, not everybody has to give a lot, but if you find this useful and you want to have it available and you can trumpet its availability and how you've used it, that's going to help the long-term availability of this whole thing for all the Midwest churches. So we'll be happy to have your partnership with that.
Yep. Any last questions before we wrap this up? Chris, really appreciate your time and effort here today. Very, very helpful. Really appreciate it very much. Good to see everybody here. Pray that you stay healthy and safe, and that God continues to bless your respective ministries as we all try to function in a wild and crazy world. And I don't remember taking ministry and viral pandemics 101 in seminary. It just wasn't there. So hope you all are making it work somehow.
Yeah, we're looking at maybe next week scheduling like a Facebook Live panel discussion of what are some of the lessons we've learned just in the last few weeks, especially for the church planters, those guys who are just getting ready to start or have just started. I think it'd be a good conversation to have. So be looking for that.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, thank you all very much. Dottie, again, a huge thank you to you for all that you've been doing. You've just been a wonderful servant to the work we're trying to do. So thank you.
Thanks, you guys. I appreciate it.
All right,
Thanks
thanks
everyone.
guys.
Good to see you all.
Bye.
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 Bye.